Hello, greetings, and salutations. Welcome aboard my podcast. I am Jason with Jay's Paradise Travels. I'd like to thank you for tuning into this week's episode. Today I'm going to be discussing my experience with the Toledo Rockets, a smaller school that's in the MAC conference, and I got to go see them some years ago. I want to tell you about it. Before I do that, I'm going to go over just a little housekeeping before I get into my experience. First off, if you would like to go on vacation, specifically a cruise, which is my specialty, or you'd like to go see a game, perhaps you'd like to also go see the Toledo Rockets, you can contact me in a couple of different ways. One of the ways that you can contact me is through email. My email address is j.paradise.travels@gmail.com. That's jay.paradise.travels@gmail.com. Or you can reach out to me through social media. I have a Facebook account as well as an Instagram account. Both of them are the same, Jay's Paradise Travels. Jays, no apostrophe in there, Paradise Travels. So you can reach out to me one of those two ways. Okay, let's talk about my experience with the Toledo Rockets. We are going back many years, uh, all the way back to my first year of marriage, actually. When I first got married, just a little background on me. When I first got married, I actually was living in Houston, Texas. We got married in December of 2010, right at the end of that year. And then about 6 months later, me and my wife moved back up to Michigan. I say back up because I'm from Michigan originally. My wife is not from here. She was born in New York, mainly raised in California, and then she lived in Texas with me, obviously, after we got married. And so now living in Michigan, she's been in all four corners. Anyways, about 6 months after we got married, we moved up to Michigan. That's where I'm from. My mom had a lot of health issues, and I'm an only child, so I came up to help my parents out. Anyways, so that was in 2011, summer of 2011, that we moved up here. And it was that upcoming football season, my first football season being married, and we were working at Michigan Stadium. Me and my wife work at Michigan Stadium as ushers. It was our first year there too. Anyways, this was the game that we went to was during that time frame. It was the first ever college football season that me and my wife were together. And I don't remember if this was her first college football game with me outside of going to Michigan. It may have been. I'd have to look at the dates to see if that Central Michigan game was one that we went to together before this one. Anyways, regardless, this if it wasn't the first, it was one of the first, maybe second. This was actually on a Friday night. The MAC conference. If I just say the MAC, the C in MAC stands for conference. So I feel, if you say MAC conference, you're just saying Mid American Conference conference. You're repeating yourself. But just saying the MAC, I don't know, it just doesn't roll off the tongue. Saying the word conference afterwards to me sounds a little bit better. So if I'm being redundant, forgive me. Anyways, the MAC conference usually does have games throughout the week, sometimes even as early as Tuesday, which I've never been to a Tuesday night game. I've been to Thursday night. I've been to Friday night, which this was a Friday night. Never been to a Tuesday night game. Anyways, this was a Friday night game, and I can't remember because this was going back a good while. I can't remember if I had gotten off work early that day or if I just had the day off altogether. Either way, I found myself having that evening free enough where we could actually go down to Toledo, have enough time to get down there. I want to say maybe we even hemmed and hawed about it if we were going to. And I think mainly because the tickets were more expensive. Like a smaller, again, when I say smaller, I mean when it comes to um, how big they are amongst college football ranks. University of Toledo is not University of Michigan. They're not Ohio State. They're not Alabama. They're not those big boys, and I think they can even admit it. How big their facility and campus is, I don't know. I don't know square miles of every single college campus. So when I say smaller, that's what I am referring to. And being that they're a smaller school, to me, I don't want to spend an arm and a leg on a smaller school because it's a smaller school. However, there, and I say that because Boise State was coming into town, and Boise State at the time was actually kind of a big dog almost. They were a smaller school that ascended to become a bigger school, I guess you could say. And it's fun. Usually, when a bigger school hosts a smaller school, the tickets are going to be cheaper than when they host the other schools. For instance, if Michigan were to host Toledo, or if Michigan State were to host Toledo, Ohio State host Toledo, tickets might run from 50 to $60. Um, but then when Michigan plays Michigan State, or Ohio State, Michigan, now you're looking at hundreds of dollars. There's a difference because the bigger schools um, aren't going to you're not going to have to pay as much to see the smaller schools. You're going to pay more to see the bigger schools. But when the opposite is the case, when a bigger school goes to a smaller school, then you know the tickets go up again as well. If Toledo were playing, let's say, Bowling Green, you could probably get tickets for $20, $30. Boise State comes to town, or a bigger school comes to town, now the tickets are 100 something bucks each, or whatever the case is. So I was hemming and hawing about it because I don't know if I wanted to spend a higher price on a smaller school when I think, well, I could just go see them again when they're playing Akron, or when they're playing Bowling Green, or another MAC team, and the tickets would be, a lot more reasonable. But somehow I decided, okay, let's do it. They're only a 45 minute to 60-minute drive down I-75 and get into Toledo. Might as well. And that's what we did. Because of that, though, I think because maybe I hemmed and hawed, and I can't remember if there was a ton of traffic. Now there might have, I think there was some. It was a night game. We got there, and by the time we got to the building, to the stadium, which is called the Glass Bowl, um, the game had already started. And sometimes that can work to your advantage, because there are times that people are trying to sell tickets at the stadium. And once the game starts, they're sometimes willing to sell them for a lot less. Because of that, we were able to get in for like $50. I can't remember if it was $50 a piece I paid, or $50 total, possibly a piece. But either way, that was cheaper than what they were selling for before the game had started. Cool. Not many times I've done that. That particular case I did. By the time we got in there, game had already started. Full crowd, and we found our seats, which we weren't too far from the student section. And we got to hear the student section and all their songs and all their cheers. Every team's got different songs that they play. I mean, everyone's got their own fight song, obviously, but even what's popular amongst their and within their stadium, certain songs they'll play all the time. And then they got their certain whatever. Everything's always unique to each team. They did have, because of the Toledo Rockets, they had some sort of, I think their mascot is some kind of like astronaut or whatever. And whenever they did a first down or something, they kind of did this, like, I don't even want to call it a dance. I don't know if it was like some sort of astronaut trying to fly through space or something. I don't know what that was exactly. I just remember that. That's the only thing that stood out to me in that. Um, if you go to Toledo or from Toledo or know anything about Toledo, you could probably educate me on what that is all about, if they even still do it. As regards the game itself, so again, Boise State came in. They're a bigger school than Toledo. They're not quite up there with the Michigan, Ohio State, Alabamas. They're not that high up yet, although they can fight with them and even pull up an upset or two. And I'll talk about them in a little bit, but they're not quite to that echelon. But they're not as small as like Toledo and the MAC conference schools. Um, they're they're a little bit higher than that. So with that being said, they came into town, and during that time, they were doing very well. So they commanded a big crowd. The stadium was full, and despite that, Toledo actually scored first in the first quarter. They actually got the first touchdown on the board and took a 6-0 lead. However, they went for 2 points instead of one, missed it, and now they're only up 6-0. Boise State, excuse me, ended up scoring two touchdowns in that quarter. At one point, though, they did miss an extra point on one of those touchdowns, and so only took a 13-6 lead from the first quarter into the second quarter. Mainly going forward, it would be Boise State after that. They did score one more touchdown in the second quarter. Toledo followed that up by kicking a field goal. So they made it 20-9 at halftime. You're thinking, all right, Toledo's still in striking distance. They're only down by 11. It's possible they can maybe make a game out of this. Um, but Boise State would score another touchdown in the third to make it 27-9. Defense clamped down on them. Toledo couldn't get much going too much after that. In the fourth quarter, both teams scored a touchdown and both teams missed an extra point. And then one more touchdown by Boise State in the fourth quarter on top of that, where they did make an extra point to make it 40-15, and that was the final. It's amazing to think that in one game, I mean, it's rare to miss one extra point in a game because it's like the closest field goal you can do. And there was three and a missed 2-point conversion. Like, I don't know if I've ever been to a game where I've seen four missed opportunities after a touchdown. You know, anyways, uh, so no surprise, Boise State ended up winning that game, 40-15. Toledo gave them a fight for a bit, but as to be expected, they didn't win. That's okay. Still, it was fun to see it. Now, the stadium itself, as I mentioned, it wasn't a huge stadium. Um, in fact, I was trying to find like how much does it hold. I was having trouble finding it. Finally, did though. Capacity is about 36,852. That's a little bit more honestly than I thought it was. I was my guess. I thought maybe like 20,000, but apparently they can hold 36,000 people in there. I couldn't find what the attendance was that game that I went to, but it was a full stadium. Like I said, they had a big boy coming to town, or at least a team bigger than them. Um, and because of it, they sold out their game. Um, so maybe there was 36,000 that night that we went in there. Not entirely sure, but I wouldn't be surprised if that ended up being what it was. So the stadium itself, as I said, is not big, but I do remember across there was a big scoreboard. I don't think we had one on our side, but yeah, across it was a night game. Lights were in our eyes, but it's kind of cool to see the lights on in a night game. Um, it's called the Glass Bowl, which is kind of a funny name to me because I just think of a glass bowl. Start mixing your stuff in there, and make a cake or something. But no, I guess apparently the reason it's called a glass bowl, apparently Toledo is like one of the leaders in the industry, the glass industry. One of the things I read used the word, it was the epicenter for the glass industry. I was like, oh, okay, I didn't know that, which is not too far down the road from us. It's with an hour drive. Didn't know that was the thing with Toledo, but apparently it is. There's probably some history there with that I don't know all about it. But years ago, I forgot the guy that had the idea for it. What his name was, Cole, maybe. Anyway, uh, I guess kind of put that out there to call it the Glass Bowl. Maybe to make it not sound like an actual bowl, maybe the Glass Bowl Stadium. Maybe that helps. I don't know if stadium is officially part of the title for it or not. Anyway, uh, yeah, but that's the name of it. And Toledo itself, um, there's some history there with Toledo. Toledo was what was many years ago. I think it was like 1835. I could be wrong on that. I'm not a history buff. If you are, I'm getting either facts or dates wrong. I apologize. This is kind of some of it's based on a little bit of memory, some of it's based on a little bit of what I looked up. But I think it was around that time where Michigan and Ohio, who has this big rivalry, right? If you know college football, you know Michigan and Ohio State, they hate each other. It's like the biggest rivalry in college football, and some even in sports. Maybe I think the Yankees Red Sox could rivalry it in college. I know there's UNC and Duke. That's in basketball. That's a pretty big rivalry, but so much so that Michigan Ohio State is called the game, and there's just all this hatred for the two teams. Anyways, where did that all start from? Where did it all start from? It all started years ago in this battle, apparently from Michigan and Ohio fighting over Toledo. And uh, Michigan and Ohio, I don't think anyone like, I mean, I don't think there was an actual war that got fought like the Civil War. I don't think it was, I think maybe one person died. It was very like tense and they're about to go at each other. I don't think it did, but I think that's where it kind of like started anyway. Um, and at the end of all of that, Toledo ended up going to Ohio, and Michigan got the Upper Peninsula. So if you ever look at Michigan on a map, it looks like a mitten. And many people who are from Michigan refer to that. They'll even point to their hand, like, I live here. And probably if you're from Michigan, you know exactly what you're talking about. If you're from other states, you might look at that person like, what are you talking about? Well, anyways, there's that. That's the lower peninsula. But if you look on the map, there's a whole other peninsula on top of it, too. And I guess during that war, Ohio got Toledo and Michigan got the Upper Peninsula. That's based on what I read there. Now, I'm not sure what would happen if Michigan got Toledo. Would Ohio have gotten the Upper Peninsula? I don't know. I have no idea. Anyway, so that started that feud many years ago and that rivalry, and apparently that somehow, I guess, also that same hatred went into the colleges and on the football field and amongst the colleges and whatever. Um, so that's that. Uh, and Toledo itself, is actually a pretty cool city to visit. In addition to the football games, I've been to Toledo a few times. Um, so this is like okay, again, Michigan, Ohio has that hated rivalry amongst each other, between each other, and Toledo is kind of like the one city aside from maybe Cedar Point and Sandusky, that amusement park, Cedar Point, which is in Ohio, Sandusky, Ohio. Toledo is probably like one of the few cities that Michigan will be cool with and accept. It's almost like one of their own. Because it is, I mean, literally when you cross Michigan, the border, you go right as you cross that border and go into Ohio, you're in Toledo. It is the very northern tip of Ohio. I'm sure there's more cities west of it too, but at least when you're coming down from Detroit on I-75 and you go down into to Ohio, Toledo is that first city that you're going into. Um, but they have some cool stuff to go see there. They have an awesome zoo. Growing up, I remember we had, of course, the Detroit Zoo, which was not far, and we also had the Toledo Zoo. And I think growing up, my parents actually preferred going to the Toledo Zoo. And it's been a long time since I've been to the Toledo Zoo. Um, I don't go to the zoo that often, just in general, but when I do, I guess we've gone to the Detroit Zoo. But the Toledo Zoo was very nice, very well kept up, and it was something that if you like zoos, it's definitely a good one to see. They had a science center. It used to be called COSI. I'm not sure what they've renamed it. There was a convention center that we went to every summer for a few years there. They have the Toledo Mud Hens, which is the Detroit Tigers minor league team. Um, I've seen them. I've never gone to a game. I've walked by it while they've had a game, and there's an opening that you can actually watch it from the street if you wanted to. I wasn't going to stand for a few hours to watch it from the street, but they have that. They have a spaghetti factory. I don't know if you've ever tried the spaghetti factory. It's pretty good. I've enjoyed it. You can go in there and sit in a train eating your spaghetti meal. So I've had some good times in Toledo. The football game too, even though Toledo lost. I was a Toledo Rockets fan for a day and they lost. That's okay though. So I've had a good time in Toledo, and again, Toledo and Michigan are not like they don't hate Toledo and Toledo doesn't hate Michigan. Like your typical Ohio Michigan hatred there. In fact, I've seen a lot of Michigan fans in Toledo, and I think because Toledo is not far from Ann Arbor. It's only an hour away ish, as opposed to Columbus, which is probably around 2 hours away. So they're actually a little closer to U of M than they are to Ohio State. And I think that's why I even work with people at University of Michigan who live in Toledo. So Toledo, even though they are in Ohio, it's almost like 50-50. They're in Ohio, but they're very Michigan friendly. And their colors are Michigan colors. I mean, blue and yellow are very similar to, Michigan's maize and blue. Um, as you can see, the Michigan stuff I have here, it's almost identical, the colors. So Toledo is definitely very Michigan friendly, and vice versa. Uh, when if you were to ask a Michigan fan anything about Columbus or Ohio, they may, ugh. But you say something Toledo, they're not going to have that much of a negative thing, or they might not have that negative reaction to it. I'll talk about Boise State a little bit. Boise State, as I mentioned, when they came in, they were kind of a bigger dog, and they did a good job. Boise State did a good job of being kind of on the smaller side, but then really raising its game up. They had a coach that really put them on the map by going undefeated, I think, one year. Were they undefeated? But they played Oklahoma, who is a big dog. They played Oklahoma in a bowl game some years ago. It was the Fiesta Bowl, I believe, and it was in the 2000s. Ended up forcing overtime and had this like hook and ladder type of play that ended up winning them the game and getting this big upset over the Oklahoma Sooners, who were a dominant team at the time. I don't know if you know what a hook and ladder is, but if you don't, I'll explain it real quick. If a quarterback throws the ball to a receiver and he catches it, it's got to be impeccable timing. But as he's catching it, another person is running right in front of him, and so he catches it and immediately gives that ball to that person who's running behind him. So most of the defenders go to him, tackle him because he's catching the ball. But as they're doing it, he gives the ball to somebody else, and they go around and had the opening for a score. That's a hook and ladder play. That happened in that bowl game, and ended up winning the game for them. And it kind of really put them on the map and made them become more known. And I have a friend, I've talked about him. We've seen games together. My friend Corey. Um, when I've done podcasts on games that I've seen in Dallas, and my friend Corey was there with me. He's a big OU fan, an Oklahoma fan, because he's from Oklahoma originally, loves Oklahoma. And so he couldn't stand Boise State and their quarterback, Zabransky, I think the guy's name was, couldn't stand him, because, beating his team. And uh, the the game for him, it was like, ugh. Um, but that did put Boise State on the map, that victory. And even though they had a lot of wins, but you go and play Oklahoma and beat them in a bowl game, that's gonna put you on the map. And because of that, they ended up starting doing better and better, as time went on. That coach did eventually move over, I think, to Washington. I think was the next job that he got. But Boise State still did pretty well, and during the time frame from like 2008 to 2011, which is the time I saw this game, they had a 50-3 record. That's a pretty impressive record over a 4-year span. And even in this game that they played here against Toledo, the week before, they had played Georgia down in the Georgia Dome. So not, I mean, that is still technically a neutral site game because it wasn't in Georgia's campus, but it's still in the state of Georgia. It might as well be considered a home game for Georgia, and beat Georgia. Now, granted, Georgia wasn't the Georgia that we've come to the last few years under Kirby Smart, that type of dominance, but they were still a big dog. And Georgia ended up losing that game to Boise State. In fact, the entire season, Boise State only lost one game. So they were quite the impressive team at the time that they came in. Since then, coaches move on. They've done well. They've still been good, but they haven't been that dominant as what they had been during that 4-year stretch. As regards Toledo, now this isn't a what you call it, a podcast for the Boise State Broncos. I'm just telling you a little bit about them. But Toledo, This is a podcast on them. They had a pretty good year too. They ended up finishing 9-4, which included a bowl victory. Now, of course, they lost to um, Boise State, and they lost the week before to Ohio State, but not by much. They only lost, I think it was like 27-22, so it was only a 5 point loss. Granted, Ohio State may have been, taking it easy on them or something. Who knows? I don't remember that game. I don't even think I watched it. Uh, but the fact that they only lost by 5 points in Columbus is not bad for them. Um, so out of four losses, only one of them was in their conference play. They beat Bowling Green on the road, which I think is their rivalry. I'm sure it is. They're just a half hour away from each other. They're not that far, just down the road. And they ended up beating Air Force in a bowl game. And they had lost three in a row: Ohio State, Boise State, and Syracuse. And then sometime a little bit later on, they lost again to Northern Illinois at home. But aside from that, they won all the rest of their games. Again, went undefeated. Not undefeated, excuse me. Only one loss there in conference play. To finish 9-4. So a pretty good season for the Toledo Rockets. How they've been since then, I don't know. I don't follow them that closely. uh, and I will say this about them, and it pains me to say it. This was under Rich Rodriguez's first year as Michigan head coach, but they are the one and only team from the MAC conference that has ever beaten Michigan. And that was, I mean, up until that point, that was in 2000. When was Rich Rod's first year? 2009, 8, 9, whatever it was. Michigan had never lost to a team from the MAC conference, and since then has not. But they have one loss to them, and that was to Toledo, 13-10. It was a big upset, and I do remember Toledo has some things that they have put up. The big upset in the big house or something to that effect. Pains me to say it, but that's what happened. So good for Toledo. I can't remember if they've played since then or not, or how many times they have played each other. I don't know. I'd have to look up that. So maybe Michigan has a losing record against Toledo. I don't know. I don't know. I'd have to look that up. Anyway, so they're decent now. Again, since then I don't know. I don't recall hearing their name too much in the MAC championship game. So they may do well, but not well enough to win it. I don't know. Or maybe they have, and I just haven't paid attention. One thing that was kind of cool. So the quarterback for Boise State at the time wasn't Zabransky. He was one from before, but it was Kellen Moore. And Kellen Moore did a phenomenal job at Boise State as quarterback. I don't know if he broke any records. He may have. I don't know. But he was a quarterback. So it was cool to see him live. And then even afterwards, got to high five him. He was giving like high fives to some of the Boise State fans at the end of the game. They kind of come up right at the bottom of the row. Normally, I'm not that way. I'm not normally like gushing over any players. I wasn't gushing over him either. Not I try not to be like that. But I was like, oh, why not? So I went down there, kind of stuck my hand out as everyone else was, and he's high fiving everyone. Got a high five to him. I could say I high five Kellen Moore. Since then, I mean, he did go to the NFL for a bit. I don't think he did too much as regards a quarterback, but then he became a coach, ended up becoming a great offensive coordinator, and now, as of this recording of March 2025, has become the head coach of the New Orleans Saints. So obviously he's doing pretty well on the coaching aspect. Um, so good for Kellen Moore, and I could say that I got to see him live. I know, again, this isn't a Boise State podcast, and whether or not I'll ever get to go see Boise State or not, it'll remain to be seen. But it's a Toledo podcast. That was just part of it. It's all part of the experience. That's what I'm relating to you. Getting you information from all different angles here. And then after the game, we left and drove home. Uh, Again, it was me and Selena, one of the uh, first, if not the first, college game outside of Michigan that we went to. It was maybe the second, but I'm thinking it may have been the first because that was early in the year, and that was our first college football season that we were married. So I'm thinking that was the first game that she went to me. She went to other games with me already. You know what? Yeah. Yeah, that's right. Because we did go to a UCLA game which I'll have to talk about that in another podcast. But we were dating at the time. So was this the first one as we were married? I think so. Anyways, yeah. But if this is something you want to do, if you want to go experience the Toledo Rockets or go to Toledo and experience a nice, fun city that they have there, let me know. Feel free to reach out to me. Again, it's j.paradise@gmail.com. That's my email address, jay.paradise@gmail.com. Or you could reach out to me through social media, where I check there and I post pictures of different things. Um, Jay's Paradise Travels, Jays, Jay's Paradise Travels. You can reach out to me that way as well. Perhaps you're thinking of going to Toledo. Maybe you're a student and you're thinking of going there and you want to check it out. Or again, maybe just want to catch a game, go see the city. Again, let me know. And if you did like this podcast, which I hope you did, please like it, rate it, subscribe to the channel, share it with others, 5-star review, all those good things that we podcasters need in order to keep our podcast going. In addition to me, I've got a business I'm uh, building up with this, with my travel agency. So please feel free to share it with as many people as you can and let me know if I can help you out with a vacation. Again, cruises are my specialty. I'd be more than happy to help you out with that as well. Thank you for listening today. I really appreciate it. Hope you enjoyed it. Hope you learned something from it, took something away from it, and hopefully it whetted your appetite to go traveling like I do. And let me know if you want to. I'll talk to you again another time. Take care. Bye bye.